From the 17th into the 20th century, people of European descent rapidly immigrated to land that Native Americans had lived on for thousands of years. North America was already inhabited by more than an estimated 1,000 tribes with distinct languages, cultures, and beliefs, and one such tribe is the Navajo. Today, the Navajo, or Dene, are the largest federally recognized tribal nation in the United States. Because the Euro-Americans' beliefs and traditions were different from Native Americans, their government saw the solution to their differences to be genocide, forced assimilation of Native populations into white culture, and movement onto reservations, by any means necessary. This immediately caused unimaginable suffering and inhumane conditions among many peaceful people who were forced to fight for their lives and the choice of how to live them. Rights which the United States government guarantees to all citizens in founding documents such as the Declaration of Independence concerning voting, religious freedom, and the pursuit of a happy life have been explicitly denied to the Navajo and other indigenous peoples. This exclusion still has effects today. The United States government has the responsibility to uphold the hopes of its founders to protect the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all citizens, and the responsibility to ensure it continues to be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people.
The Navajo Nation stretches over 27,325 miles across the Four Corners region, through Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. Traditionally, the Navajo refer to themselves as Dene in English, directly translating to the people. The Dene's original homelands are an extremely important part of their culture, much like many other Native American tribes.
The Western mind will try and conceive of what does that even mean? But to an indigenous kid, it's like, well, of course, I am the land.
As American settlers moved further westward with ambitions of owning land and homesteading, the government felt the need to protect its citizens from the threat that Native Americans posed to their way of life. Between 1863 and 1868, the Navajo were forced to walk between 250 and 450 miles in the Long Walk to Bosque Redondo internment camp. This was one example of the countless parallel journeys that other Native American tribes were forced to take to reservations and internment camps. When Dene leaders signed Treaty with the Navajo, 1868, it allowed them to return home after years of imprisonment. The Dene were one of very few tribes who were allowed to return to their spiritually important lands.
This treaty had conditions to allow the Dene's return home, one such condition being that children had to attend Catholic schools to, quote, ensure civility. Leading up to this time period, Native Americans were viewed as a problem that could be solved using war, treaties, and reservations to dispose of them. However, during the 19th century, America realized that Native American populations were not going to die out, and many Americans saw Native people as a financial burden to the United States on their reservations. In an attempt to solve the, quote, Indian problem, the U.S. government altered the role of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Instead of being considered a War Department, its new role was to assimilate Native Americans into Western culture, by force if necessary.
Assimilation was seen as a good deed by the public because it offered a productive future for Native Americans rather than relying on the government. It was also cheaper for the United States to assimilate Native Americans than to continue fighting them in the so-called Indian Wars. A common slogan used for the assimilation movement was "Kill the Indian, save the man." This slogan exemplifies the public sentiment towards Native Americans because the mostly Christian population of America believed that by converting Dene and other such tribes, they were saving them. The turn away from this movement would not be seen until the 1920s, after generations of knowledge had already been lost.
While there were Native schools on the reservation, most Dene children had to attend residential schools.
They weren't allowed to wear their hair the way they wanted to. They weren't allowed to pray the way they wanted to. They weren't allowed to speak their language.
Although it initially appeared to set up systems that would benefit both parties, the 1868 treaty had consequences that would forever affect the Dene.
The treaty paid for the Navajos' return trip to some of their original homelands and outlined limits of space to be occupied by the Dene in the modern-day Four Corners region. It gave the head of each family 160 acres of land and a single man 80 acres. The treaty outlined that they could keep this land so long as they improved it and critically used it for farming, instead of their traditional semi-nomadic lifestyle.
But all those forced to take up farming had some of the worst agricultural land in the United States and were forced to sell nearly all of their crop due to the small total amount they were able to produce. This meant that the U.S. government, whether intentionally or not, had created a dependency on payments and aid for the Navajo.
Some key pieces of context are necessary to understand exactly what rights have been withheld from the Navajo. First, what is sovereignty? Sovereignty is the ability of a state to govern itself. This means the highest level of authority is not the federal government, but the state or territory. Reservations create and practice their own laws within their borders except for a few specific cases. The Navajo Nation gained sovereign status with the Treaty with the Navajo, 1868.
The next necessary term is citizenship. It is central to why we have governments and how they work. A citizen is a recognized legal subject of a government. Citizens are essentially making a deal. The government's responsibility is to give me rights and protection, and in turn, I have responsibilities to uphold in order to keep a smoothly functioning nation that serves me and my peers, the people. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution states that all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens. However, because reservations are in many ways considered sovereign territories, the 1884 Supreme Court case Elk v. Wilkins found that this meant that Native Americans are not citizens by birth. In 1924, all Native Americans were granted citizenship under the Snyder Act.
As citizens, the Dene and other Native Americans had to pay taxes and uphold their responsibilities as citizens. Despite being federally recognized as citizens, however, many states still denied Native Americans their rights, essentially failing their responsibility to the people. One such right withheld from Native American citizens was voting. Some states used loopholes to deny natives their votes until 1957, and even today, voters on reservations face challenges accessing polls and voter registration that would be considered discriminatory anywhere else in the country. Because of the complex notion of tribal sovereignty, however, the United States government finds it extremely difficult to add infrastructure and fixed issues on reservations to guarantee Native Americans their equal voting rights, but it is still their responsibility to do so.
The Declaration of Independence, although not legally binding, specifically states the hopes of the founders of America. But guaranteed rights in these documents have been denied to the people of the Navajo Nation. It outlines the roles a government should play in its citizens' lives. In essence, it outlines that a government's responsibility is to protect its citizens' rights and ability to pursue the lives they want, whatever those lives may look like. And that citizens, the people, should have direct influence on who has the responsibility of protecting their rights. The Navajo were not U.S. citizens, and their reservation was a sovereign nation. So while the forced assimilation through residential schools didn't legally break any laws, it went against the moral standards that our founders hoped America would hold itself to, by denying liberty and the happiness and meaning which many can only find within their chosen religion and culture.
Cultural acceptance. It's so important for an individual, for their identity, for their self-esteem, for their ability to say, I'm part of something.
While not the only cause, the government's actions have led to more tangible direct violations of these unalienable rights for people living on the Navajo Nation today. Historical trauma, violence, poverty, high levels of unemployment, discrimination, and racism have allowed mental health to become a widespread issue.
As of 2021, the national average of suicide is 14 people per 100,000 for both genders, with women sitting at 5.7 per 100,000 and 22.8 per 100,000 for men. Meanwhile, suicide is the 7th leading cause of death on the reservation, with a total average of 17.8 people per 100,000, with a shocking 31.41 per 100,000 for men and 4.7 per 100,000 among women.
This generational trauma is so afoot, and yet you still have not lost your essence of love. I won't go into the horror stories, but there's plenty, and yet the Dene people and other indigenous people still know how to love.
But the elders always speak of the 7 generations. Every Indian reservation that I've worked on are working towards the 7 generations from when they were abused until the future. So they teach them natural ways to cook. They teach them traditional way to dress. The elders are the ones that are doing it, and the universities that are around the areas are also incorporating Native American teaching.
To conclude, westward expansion was used as justification for the cultural eradication of the Navajo and other indigenous tribes. Today, scars from the United States government's failure to uphold its responsibility to protect the rights it guarantees to all citizens for the Dene is evident on the Navajo reservation when it comes to mental health, the ability to invoke substantial change within the government through voting, and the right to religion and culture as compared to the greater United States. However, it is important to remember the value of tribal independence, sovereignty, from the government because of the ancient knowledge that can only be found with the traditions and stories of the Navajo, and how influence from a powerful nation can destroy it in the name of progress.
Oh, all we see is boarded up houses and, trucks with 3 wheels and sitting around in junkyards, and people don't care about working. It's like, no, that's not what's happening there. It's really not what's happening. That's the government influence. We don't need to go to India or Africa or Egypt for spiritual knowledge. It's right there.